Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on your time zone, and also depending you're watching us live or you're watching a recording. We're approaching of October, and we're getting into the final sessions on topics related to cyberbullying. And as usual, today we'll have a guest, and we'll be talking about an interesting topic, which is digital citizenship. But before presenting you the guest, let me welcome those who are following the stream online. Welcome, Adelina Silva. Good evening, boa noite e bem-vinda. And a note as usual to all those that are following us live. Please feel free to leave your comments, your suggestions, your observations, either on Facebook or YouTube, because we're live on both platforms. Today, together with me, I also have Sonia Seixas. Welcome, Sonia, and good evening to you as well.
Hi, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone.
And Sonia will be co-hosting this session with me and asking questions. As I said, we'll be talking about digital citizenship, and the topic, the title for tonight's session is Connecting the Dots, How Digital Citizenship Addresses the Needs of Online Users. And we'll have Mike Ribble with us, and I'll be introducing him shortly. And Mike will share the work from his latest book about how to look at digital citizenship as an integrated concept in schools. He will show how the issues that happen online need to be addressed in full knowledge of how to use the online tools. Mike will also connect the various topics plaguing both adults and children online that should be addressed together. Mike is an author and presenter, and he runs his own company called My Digital Experience. So, Mike, good evening. For you, I believe it's good afternoon.
Late afternoon, but heading into evening. Thank you for having me. Yeah, exciting. I'm so glad to be talking to you and to Sonia and everybody else that's online right now. So hopefully we can have some good discussion the next hour.
Yeah, for sure. I remember the first time that we got in touch, I approached you because I read an article that you had written on your Digital Citizenship website, and the article was the 9 elements of digital citizenship. And I wrote you an email asking for permission to translate it. But now I see that besides, and that article was part of your book, Digital Citizenship for Schools. But I also learned more recently during the email exchange that we had for this session that you have written another book, and that I don't know, that I hadn't known about it. And I would like you to give us some hints on this book that I hadn't learned of.
Sure. This was the second book that I actually wrote. I wrote the first edition of Digital Citizenship in Schools, which was actually part of my dissertation work. And it was my major professor that kind of moved me down this road and really wanted me to create a foundation of what is digital citizenship. And so that's where I started. But my goal really was working with parents. How do I help parents to really see, what the issues are and how they need to be talking to their children about it. Because at the time I was having, I had middle school, young teenage children as well. So it was an exciting time for me as well to see this in action as they were getting into social media, into very much into smartphones and all the different technologies and what that meant. And the more parents I talked to, they kept asking, my kids know more than I do, and there's so much, and I don't know what to do, and so I just kind of let them do it, and they take care of it. And I said, you really need to be involved in this. You need to be involved in this process, and I wanted something to provide that resource for them. And so I went back to my publisher and said, I really think that this is something that's needed. The parents really need this. And they were just starting to get into doing some parent books and some younger children books. And they thought that was a good title. And so we jumped on that as well. So, we've had that out. That goes back into about 2009 when I published that book. But the new book that we'll talk about later in the show actually has an entire section on working with parents and talking about refreshing those same ideas. So it's not an entire book, but it's got a piece of it. And then even on my website, I've got some pieces in there as well to help parents. So hopefully all those together will, they'll find their way, and we can kind of help them navigate through that. So that was an exciting time.
So basically, this book is 10 years old, but and you felt that after writing a book for teachers and for schools, that you needed to write something for parents because they also needed help. And that's an interesting view, because I usually say that parents, not only teachers need help, parents also need help. So it's two audiences, different audiences with different needs that we need to help. So it is the second book is the one that caught my eye. I'm not really sure whether it was the first, the second, or the third edition. Most probably, I believe it would be the first or the second. That led me to write you an email to ask permission to translate into Portuguese the 9 elements of digital citizenship that you had defined and that you had posted on the digitalcitizenship.net website. Can you give us an overview of those 9 elements?
Yes. And that was part of the whole goal with my dissertation work, was really creating a foundational piece and trying to create, how do I organize all of this information? Because even, I talked about parents, but educators were also, struggling with, we talk about a lot of these topics, and, cyberbullying is definitely one of those main topics that we come across. But, the elements were an opportunity for us to really start breaking down what all the different pieces were when we talked about digital citizenship. And so, when I put that together, when I talked about, like digital access, that was very near and dear to my heart. My mother was a special needs teacher, and that's part of that digital access is those special needs students, and how these tools are so critical for them and so important to help them along. But it's also about where we are. So, different parts of the world, and I've been very fortunate to do some traveling in different parts of the world. And big metropolitans, they tend to have more resources, have more opportunities. But then you get into some of the smaller areas, out further away, and they don't have as many resources. And so I kind of touch upon that also in the new book, and I don't want to give too much away, but we talk about how we get it out to there. So that's just one of them. But then we get into like commerce, and we talk about it, and how can we look at this from a monetarily piece, because people are online and they're buying. We're heading towards the holiday season now, and at least here in the United States, a lot of people are buying online, and that's where they live. And so but are we aware of how we're protecting our data, and how we're because that is a big discussion point anymore about where is our data, who has it. So that's another communication. I could talk, we could go hours and hours to talk about communication, because there's so many pieces. We've actually expanded that a little bit in the latest book, and we've talked about communication, but also collaboration. And we feel like that is the next step. It's not just are we communicating, but how are we integrating that into online, but face-to-face, and all of that in a community setting, and how that works. So that's kind of where we're moving. Then you get into literacy. We talk about literacy, but we're even moving that one further along, not just to be literate. We want them to be literate, but we want them to be fluent as well. We want them to be able to utilize that for moving them up. So we see these as tools to help elevate our students, our families, our communities up, beyond where they are today. And then etiquette has always been, a piece that has been talked about. Some of the early terminology, and I've seen it pop up again here lately as netiquette has come back up, and it's one of those, being nice and how we do that. And we've kind of been changing over the last 20 years of what does that look like? How are we to interact with each other, and what does that in a social setting look like, and how do we help each other to understand, moving forward? So, that's, those are, aspects, I don't want to spend the entire time, but digital law, the legal aspects, and we in the United States are actually, there's more laws that are actually being put together that are actually called digital citizenship laws. Utah, Washington State have actual digital citizenship laws that are on the books. Rights and responsibilities, that's that, back and forth. We get a lot of opportunities with technology, but also how do we repay that? How do we pay that forward as adults, but also our children? How do they move it forward? And then health, wellness, we want to be healthy users, appropriate users of technology, and it can affect us in a physical way as well, so we need to balance that, and how do we look at that, and that we're not just sitting in front of screens all the time, but how do we use it? And then digital security and safety is that protection piece. How do we protect ourselves and protect others, to look at how we're using this? And like I said before, our data goes so many different places, and it's amazing sometimes how far it can reach. We talk about these big companies, and the whole thing with Facebook about a year ago with Cambridge Analytica, and where their data went, and so we have to think about that. And definitely when you talk about cyberbullying, where does that data, where does it reside, and who can get to it, and what do they do with it? And hopefully we can then start to lean on some of the other elements like etiquette and rights and responsibilities, and tie all those things together, because it's not, when we talk about a community, and that's what digital citizenship is, it's about a community, is how do we all work together, and how do we all play together? And we know that there's some people that do better than others, and some that aren't, but we want to try to be better. We want to try to move this forward to try to be good digital citizens.
What I really liked is I'm also the type of guy that likes to put things into box. I think that it makes easier for people to understand the concepts. And as I also use something similar. And perhaps that's what attracted me. When I talk about online risks, I also mentioned the 5 C's: content, contact, commerce, conduct, and copyright. And that gives us, giving those 5 boxes helps us organize our thoughts, our ideas, and it makes easier for people to understand it. That's what really attracted me, because you provided a framework, and that's I find really attractive. Edith Utiti is saying hello. Edith
Hello.
usually follows us from Harare in Zimbabwe, Southern Africa. So hi, Edith, and welcome. And Abílio Carvalho is one of our regular viewers, and he's asking, the problem is that large companies are multinational and laws are national, and governments do not understand each other to create multinational laws. Is there anything to bridge it?
You know, that's what I'm hoping that digital citizenship does, is it, you know, rises sort of above that, and we can have that discussion of how we want to be as digital citizens and how do we want to interact, because we know that, you know, governments and different unions and things, you know, they fall behind on this, but we as people, we need to determine what the direction is and, you know, help to drive that forward. And I know that that's, you know, sometimes hard, and, you know, when you're talking about big countries versus very small countries and all that, but we are the people, we're the basis, and we set the tone of how that's going to work. And I know that, you know, sometimes it feels like we're just one little piece, but if we can all band together, if we can all be citizens of this new digital space, and hopefully we drop the digital piece and just say, as citizens, these are the things that we hold dear. These are the things that we hold, you know, close to us, that we can move them forward. So, you know, it is hard, because, you know, that's one thing that I tried to look at in this last book, is trying to look at internationally, you know, how it's different. But what was interesting is there was so many similarities of the issues and topics from very, you know, large countries, the very wealthy countries, but also to very small countries, and that there's so many similarities that we have together, and we just need to work together to find those commonalities, to find that common ground.
And for instance, the United States is divided into states. It's a union of states.
Yes.
And you have the state legislation, and then you have the federal legislation. And in Portugal, more or less, because we're part of the European Union, we have local laws. But nowadays we also have European directives, European regulations that the countries, the 28 members of the European Union, have to follow. But as you said, it also starts with our rights and responsibilities. It does. You know, it's up to you, me, and Sonia, and everybody who's following us to make our the values that we cherish and turn them into rules, basically, whether he's using the internet or just visiting the coffee shop, really.
Exactly.
The other thing that I found interesting, and we'll get to your latest book shortly, is also how on the book you mentioned how we can teach these 9 elements using what you call the reps
Yep.
to various grades of learning.
Yep.
Do you want to give us a quick run through?
Certainly.
Because this has been updated, and we'll get to it
Sure.
now next.
The reps were something that I think resonated with a lot of educators because it kind of gave that, like you mentioned, that structure that they were kind of looking for, that respect, the educate and protect. And, those became sort of these pillar ideas within digital citizenship. And so what I kept hearing from educators was, I need some help of how do we begin this process. And in the United States, at least, the results, the survey results that we're seeing is that children are showing up into our schools already having multiple years of experience with technology already. Common Sense Media, who does a lot here in the United States, did a survey years ago, and this has been 2 or 3 years ago, that they actually said that kids as young as under the age of 5 had already 50% had already touched some sort of technology by the age of 5. So I kept thinking, well, that's before they even reach our schools. So here they're showing up already with this experience. And as you mentioned, we're divided up into states, and it's even locally is how our school districts are run. So each school district is very different from one another. So I started to break these down and talked about the respect, educate, and protect, and started to say, these are some of the basic kinds of things that kindergarten up through 2nd grade could really talk about and start to understand. So talking about etiquette, those are things that we should be teaching our young children, to be good users, but also good citizens. And how do I live with other people and interact? And then literacy is that education piece, understanding and getting, learning more about the technology, and then your rights and responsibilities. And then as you get a little older, you start to move up on some of the skills, access, communication, security are a little bit heavier topics for educators. And then you move into the 6th through 8th and talk about law and commerce and health. Those are things that as they move into those upper grades to university, to different levels, that they can understand, what do they need to do to be good citizens. And I felt like we needed to start at a fairly young age and build on those, so as they matriculate up, they can really be helping, themselves and their classmates to say, we learned about that when we were little, and now we need to show how we use that. And so it's a building process, just like any other educational foundational piece is. We talk about it, and then we recover that, and then we move on to the next level, and we help each other. And the new book, which we'll talk about in a second, really opens that up. I love the reps, but we've opened that up even to another level when we talk about the work that we put together in this last one.
And the last book is one that was recently published, right? When was it
Yes.
published, Mike?
It actually just came out this summer. It was the end of June, and it was released during the ISTE conference. ISTE is the International Society for Technology and Education, and we have a very large conference at the end of June every year. About 17,000 educators from a lot from the United States, but internationally as well, come to that conference, and it was very well received. I have to talk about this just real briefly. That we had all these books that they had at the conference, and they sold all of them out. The whole first printing was sold out by the 1st of August. So from the end of June to 1st of August, the first printing was already gone, and we found some and made some updates, so that it's already in its second printing of that book. So we're very excited and very happy with how all of that came together.
That's a really good result, and I'm not surprised. As I said to you, I got the book yesterday. I had just a chance to give it a quick read, and I find it really interesting to put my hands on it to give it a full read. Meanwhile, António João Silva, who is also regular, says boa noite, which is good evening in Portuguese. So go on, António. Welcome to our show, and thank you for being with us. And we also have Edith saying a great discussion, and it really is, because I also, besides cyberbullying, internet safety is green, and is connected. I would say that digital citizenship is at the base of cyberbullying prevention and also internet safety. Just a reminder to those that are following us that they are free to ask any questions or make any comments, and I'll bring them into the live stream. Sonia, do you want to say something? Do you have any questions, comments before we move
I don't have yet a question. I was just looking at. It was very interesting to see that you took the 9 elements of digital citizenship, and you fit them according to the age of the children. So I think even for parents, not just teachers, but even for parents, I think it's a very interesting way of to look there and to see. I start with this one, and then I go there, and then I end here. So it's a very interesting way to go. Thank you so much.
It's a nice roadmap. That's also what I feel. It guides us. It provides us with a roadmap, particularly from. The one that I read was Citizenship for Schools, provides a roadmap for teachers to teach digital citizenship. But as you said, you have a new book. It's the Digital Citizenship Handbook for school leaders, and it provides new research, and it's based on new research and provides new resources. Do you want to give us
Sure.
quick,
this was a kind of a long time coming. My co-author Marty Park is actually the Chief Information Officer for the state of Kentucky here in the United States. So he has a lot of experience comes to this. Marty and I have known each other for probably a decade or so, and he brought so many great ideas to this new book, and we really tried to interweave a lot of stories, but also a lot of other voices. We brought in the school media library folks, Kristen Matson. She has her own book out as well, but she did a piece in this. Jason Oler did the preface. I have to give a shout out to Jason. Jason's been around a long time. He did Digital Citizen, Digital Community years ago, and he really understands, the whole concept, and he really was somebody that I leaned on a lot. He gave me so many great ideas and thoughts on this. But we also we talked about teacher preparation. So when you talk about university, how does that look with digital citizenship, and what should schools and districts and all those different levels look at, when they, are talking about digital citizenship? Because, like I said, it's so multifaceted. It's sometimes hard to really get a direction. And Leanne Lindsay out of University of Arizona wrote a section on that teacher preparation and what they should be looking at. So she did a section. One thing that I really, really wanted, as I mentioned, my mother was a special needs teacher at the elementary, but also at the high school level at different times. And I did, there's a section in there that we had a gentleman out of Kentucky that Marty knew, that did a piece on special needs and how we need to work a little differently with our special needs students with technology and how they interact. So it was something that I felt was important. I'd done a lot of research, could not find a lot of material on special needs and technology use, and this gentleman did a wonderful job to really pull that together. It's not a very long section, it's a small section, but I'm hoping to build on that and to really try to expand that idea both here in the US but also internationally, because I think it is so important that we don't lose sight of all of our students. We have our mainstream students, but also all of the rest of them. So it was one of those books that we talked about it for several years, but when it happened, it was kind of like all kind of came together very quickly. So we were very, very happy with the result, and got it out, and our goal was to make the conference, and we did it. And so I thank everybody at ISTE for all of their work, but I really have to give a shout out to Marty, and I'll talk about some of his work here in a little bit. But Marty is just a rock star, and just somebody that I'm very impressed with. And he's a younger man, even though he's a CIO for an entire state. But you're going to hear his name in the future. So great person.
It's very interesting that you mentioned special needs students, because one of the things that I feel also is, and I've been looking at trying to find research on it, is special needs students are usually targets of bullying and cyberbullying. Exactly. And it's also an area that there is very few research, and to look into it, because, as we know, usually targets of and victims of bullying and cyberbullying tend not to complain or not to report that they are being victims, and we need to study that. So, and besides the inclusion factor that you mentioned, one of the things that I have to mention regarding your first book, and it's also from what I've seen to the new one, is both books are a treasure chest of resources. I find it incredible that your books are starting points also, besides providing a framework and whatnot. They are a starting point for us to learn about other people's work. And I find that fascinating. And it's in my perspective, it's one of the things that also makes a book a good resource, and yours definitely are. Edith Utiti says, do you look at the digital citizenship on a global scale? Can these principles be applied anywhere in the world, or are they specific to your location? I remind you, Edith is following us from Zimbabwe in Southern Africa, so her concerns make sense.
Yes.
I think. Yeah.
No, it's definitely a valid question, and I found that when working with folks internationally, that the elements and the topics definitely resound with people all over the world. And I will tell you that in this new book, we have a section that's just for international and talk about different places. And I hit upon 3 different parts of Africa. So Egypt, had some contacts up there. Actually, somebody in South Africa, not in Zimbabwe, but all the way in South Africa, and then up in Nairobi as well. So some different looks at the needs and the issues that happen at different parts of Africa, because I know it's such a large country, and there's the issues vary in different places, very much even in the United States. Our issues do vary in different places. I'm very lucky that I actually teach an online class, and I teach a class out of Georgia, which is in the southern part of the United States, and I'm more in the Midwestern part of the United States. So I am very lucky to have contact with those students to hear what's going on in their districts and what are they doing. So it gives me a little bit of a perspective of not just what I'm doing, but what's happening in different parts of my own country. But I had a gentleman out of China that helped, out of Australia, of course, Canada, Mexico were also involved. So we tried, I tried to touch on different parts of the world, and had a little bit of experience up in Brussels and up in Warsaw, I was at the international schools and the American schools up in those parts of the union up in that area. So gave me, different perspectives of not just the United States, but globally. And, it's so important that we are talking about this as a global discussion, not just one country versus another, but how do we work together? Because we are citizens, and the digital helps us to create this new community that we can all communicate. Just like, here we are 5 hours apart, having this conversation and discussing this topic.
Absolutely. And I also think that you provide a framework, you give details within that framework, but people can also develop their own resources using that framework. For instance, if we're talking about access, in the US, you have the big cities where you have fiber and access and things like that, and then you have rural areas where you don't have fiber, I believe.
Yep.
I'm even wondering whether in some areas you might still have dial-up access.
It's close. I mean, it's not quite as bad as that. That was one thing that was so nice about working with Jason Oler. He actually worked up in Alaska. He was at the University of Alaska, and think of how much space that they have. And he actually talks about early days of going from papers being mailed back and forth for distance courses to the first dial-up. And he talked about the difference between 3 weeks of waiting for papers to come to 3 hours. It still took a long time in dial-up, but the difference that it made for them, and the barriers that it broke down, and how far we've come even since then, and how we continue to break down different barriers to move this technology everywhere. When I happened to be in Egypt about a year and a half ago, and everyone is connected. They've had their cell phones, and I actually was able to live with a family there in Cairo, and it was just exciting to see how they interacted and communicated, and that they have those tools, and how do they use them to move their not them only themselves but their children and give them opportunities.
Abilio Carvalho is also commenting, our societies are still truly entering the digital age. Both children and us adults are still in the digital age. We are becoming, for good and evil, all elements of the global digital universe. How has America prepared its citizens for this new era? Do we have similar
It's a great question.
preparation?
Yeah,
Feel free.
It's we've tried. The topic of digital citizenship has it's become more known in the educational realm, at least here in the United States. So there is a lot more schools that are expanding on it. A lot of the big districts. One of the people that are mentioned in this newest book is actually from Los Angeles Unified School District. So a very, very large, the second largest school district in the United States. So they are setting a path for the rest of the country, and we've tried to build on this as well. And I will have to say, ISTE, the International Society for Technology and Education, has been at the forefront of that in the last few years. And they have standards for administrators and teachers and students and all of those. And digital citizenship is the only standard that is in every single one of them. It is in every single one of the standard areas for teachers, for students, for administrators. So it becomes that piece that kind of flows between all of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, the interesting thing, and going back to the first slide, your book is for school leaders. Who are those school leaders? Who do you include? The look that I had at the book, you mentioned them.
I believe that anybody that picks up the book is a leader. If they're interested in this topic, then you're a leader. You're wanting to be out there, out in front. And like I said, we talk about librarians, we talk about educators at all different levels. We talk about our school resource officers, our everybody that's in the school building is at a certain level a leader. And we try to provide resources for each one of them so that they can take those forward. And back to the last question, how do we build on that? Well, they all need resources. And as we send our kids, our students out of teacher preparation, they need to understand about all these topics and about cyberbullying and sexting and all of these issues, and how are they going to address those when they come out into schools? Because if they don't have the tools, if they don't have the knowledge, then it's going to be very difficult for them. And so they need resources as well, and they need to be prepared. And that's really what this last book has really been about, is trying to provide as many resources. I very deliberately put questions at the end of each chapters to really try to challenge the users of how are we moving this forward? What are we doing? We created in each of the elements, we created little STEM lessons of how to start down this road. And there's even some that are expanded lessons as well. Like you said, we tried to provide the resources and where to go to if what we have is not enough. There's always going to be more that are out there, but we wanted to provide that foundation, as you said, to start down that road. How do we help them? How do we move everybody forward?
Okay, just a reminder that those following us, feel free, if you have any questions, to put them in the comments, and I'll bring them into the stream. So this book now talks about the 3 S's. for safe, savvy, and social. It's a variation of the reps. Do you want to
Exactly.
elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's basically flipping the reps. You can see them off to the side, and kind of inverting them, but giving us a new foundation of, how, being a safe user, and what does that look like? How is it being savvy and understanding and being smart about using technology, and then moving into the social, going into social media and being online and interacting with others. What does that look like? And so it's the same topics, just kind of flip them on there, because some people like that alliteration. They like safe, savvy, and social, and I like the reps. They were my first, but it did resound with a lot of people when we did the research, and they liked the topic. And as you said, your work with cyberbullying, but you also have this whole piece on safety as well, and we felt like that is one of those structural pieces that people need to have. It's not all about safety, but it's that basis, it's that structure to start with.
Absolutely. A new thing that the new book also has is a
Progression.
See much more than that I've shown in this slide. You now have a new one. Do you want to
Sure.
explain it? Was the need that you felt to develop and expand on what you had?
Yeah, it was taking that idea, and I like that idea, those boxes, and building on them, but we took it even to the next level and said, the safe, savvy, and social are these base pieces, but how do we build on them? I mentioned earlier that I see digital citizenship very much like I see teaching about language, because you learn the basics, you learn that those first ideas, and then you build upon them to the next level, and you continue to teach and to reinforce those ideas. And I think that too often we see digital citizenship and some of these topics as sort of an inoculation. We get a shot, and then it goes away. Once we have one shot for the year, then we don't have to worry about it anymore. And it's more about embedding this into our curriculum, and the teachers were struggling with that, and they just couldn't. They were having trouble because they have so much else to do. My wife she teaches elementary school, so I bounced a lot of these ideas off of her. And I said, what if we were able to put it into your curriculum and see where it fit and help you there? And that's what the progression chart does, is that begins to say, okay, here are some of these ideas to begin with at the elementary level, but then we build upon them and we move to the next. But where can we put that? Where does that fit? So over on the right-hand side and under number 6, we talk about the cross-curricular connections, and we talk about, it could be in social studies and or into language, into history, into mathematics, into science, and where do we fit those into, and really help our teachers to say, oh, I'm already doing some of these things. Now I can see that, but now I can build on it. I can take this to the next level and talk about these different topics under access, under commerce, under rights and responsibilities, under health and wellness. Now I can see where am I supposed to be, and this is our hope, is that we'll have people start to get a groundswell under this and say, now these are the things that we need to start with. These are how we build upon them, and this is how we take it to the next level and help, as we've talked about, not just our students, but our parents, our community, all the people that use the tools and how that, how they can use it. And I will tell you, this is a living, breathing document right this minute that if you go to that DigCit Live, you can download it and you can fit it into your own curriculum and begin to move things around and put it into places. It's in a spreadsheet model so that you can take that as educators and really start to see where does that fit as a leader, as a principal, as a superintendent, but also in the classroom. What does that look like? And that's, I don't know if you could tell, I'm so excited by this idea of being able to take this and to provide something for our educators that they can take and use in the schools, because it's not just an idea, it's how do we act, what's the action, where do we take that? And that's what I wanted to do. And this is now 15 years that I've been doing this. And this is, I don't think it's the end, but at least it gives us a place to just launch from.
And one of the things that I find interesting is that this is not the expansion that you have done on this chart also involves other subjects in the curriculum. So it's not an ICT thing. It's something that can be also subject on other subjects, as you mentioned. And so you have all the reason to be excited, because you're not the only one. Edith was saying safe, savvy, and social. I love that approach, catchy and relatable. So I'm sure that by this time, Edith is already downloading the spreadsheet. And no, but you really have reasons to be happy, because I find it that it really makes sense, to see where it crosses with the curriculums from other subjects that are touching that. And you also mentioned that it's hands-on. And what's your driver's license? Can you expand on that?
This was part of what Marty brought to the table as far as his experience. He and the folks, when he was working on his dissertation, worked on this digital driver's license, and that was some of my early work. Where I kind of played with this idea of a driver's license, and that it's not just a it's just not given to them, but they have to learn the rules of the road to be able to use the technology. And how do we create this? And so the University of Kentucky that Marty was at, they ran with that, and they created this iDrive digital piece. And it is a full curriculum piece. It covers the elements, and they've updated with the safe, savvy, and social as well this summer. And so they've tied all of these in. And the great thing is it's free. It's available out there, and people can use it. And even outside of the United States, if you're having trouble, like Canada was having some issues with being able to access servers inside the United States, but that's a whole different discussion. But when that happened, the folks in Kentucky actually sent the source code up to Canada, and they loaded it on their servers so they could have it. So they provide that. Like I said, it's free. It's a great resource. It gives some ideas of where our students are as far as their usage of technology. There's a little bit of screenshot on that next slide that talks about it. There you go. You see the safe, savvy, and social on the side, and you see basic user, power user, and expert. So as students progress through them, they can move through those different levels and you see access and health and wellness and commerce and,
Yeah.
and all the different elements are all there. So kids can go in, they learn a little bit about it, and then they have little quizzes on it, and then they can move forward. And they did a great job with this this DDL, the digital driver's license. And I'm so, like I said, this was how Marty and I kind of started off, was their work and pulling this together, and I'm so happy for them and all of their work, and they really did a great job with it. And anybody that wants it, like I said, it's not just the United States. They are in multiple different countries. Just go to the iDriveDigital.com and go to the contact us, and they will help you. They will work with you. So it's just a great resource.
And it's available currently only in English. And I would guess that the next, because that's what happens in the US, next language usually is Spanish.
Exactly.
Right?
Typically. Yep. And maybe they've already started in it. I haven't talked to Marty yet this week, so you never know. They could be already working on it as well.
In Europe, we have also European digital driver's license, I believe, but I'm not sure. Or it's something like European ICT driver's license. There's something in that area, but as far as I know, it has no relation. It's more to provide to fill the access need, to provide training for people to be able to have access to these technologies and be able to use them. So it's really interesting, and I'll definitely be having a look at it, because I think it makes all the sense. But you haven't stopped here, so we've already mentioned the first book, the Digital Citizenship in Schools. Then you felt the need to write a book for parents, and then you expand the first book for teachers, but for school leaders, basically, which is, as you explained, anybody within a school setting. And you haven't stopped, and now you have a new fiction book coming based on the ideas of digital citizenship. Do you want to expand on that?
Sure. This was something that I had heard from library media folks, that for their young adult students, especially males, there wasn't a lot of resources that were out there, and so I created this fiction book. It's actually hopefully a beginning of a series. I'm working on book 2 right at the moment, so we're going to expand on it. But we talk about the underlying pieces, talking about the skills that you need as a good digital citizen, and it's written in a fictional layer. But these 3 friends, how they work together, and they really are able to work through issues, but being good citizens at the same time. So it was a vast departure, like you said. I've done a lot of nonfiction, but fiction was a new hill for me to climb. So something new.
Okay, and something that librarians for sure will welcome from your explanation. And commenting on the digital driver's license. Let me see if I can pick up her comment. Yes, here, and she's saying the digital driver's license tool sounds great. Thank you for sharing that information. And being Zimbabwe, an English speaking country, I'm sure it's a resource that will be helpful for her. I'd like to remind our viewers we're approaching the hour. So if you have any questions that you would like to put forward to Mike, now is the moment too, because we're reaching the end of our stream. I would like to remind those following us that Mike has also a website, which is Digital Citizenship.net, where you can also find some information and resources, namely the article that I've mentioned, the 9 elements or themes of digital citizenship, in which is a way to introduce you to his work and to the idea of his framework. You can also find Mike on Twitter. He has a Twitter account, and also on LinkedIn. So you can also get in touch with him there. Do you want also to let us know about your latest endeavor, the My Digital Experience project?
Certainly. This was a piece that, as I was starting to look at all these, I'm trying to really expand, the ideas, both digital citizenship, but also in my experience as a technology director, and how all of those work together, because there are structural issues as well as you put these things together, and have to have some knowledge and understanding. So I started to reach out to different schools and districts, and trying to tie all this together, not just the sharing the information about digital citizenship, but helping the technical folks as well, and what that looks like and how all of that fits together. So, because sometimes the back end folks, they don't always understand how all of that fits, and I try to be that bridge. I come from a education background, but I've been in the technical space for about 12 years now. So it's been a while that that I've kind of tried to balance the two pieces of how we use it in education, but also understand it in technology as well.
Okay. Sonia, if you have any comments or question, also feel free to make them now. Mike, Sonia, do you
Yes.
have any comments?
So I have to thank you so much, Mike, because it was a wonderful session. And thank you for sharing with us all those free resources. I think their download will increase. So
Please.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sonia.
Okay. Mike, we usually end, I ask you a question and give you a minute or two to think about, not because it's a complex question, because it's not, just to give me time to introduce the following streams, the ones that we're going to have tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. So it seems that we have a comment. Yes, Billy is also saying, let me bring it, always learning something new from the lives, plus a great one from Mike Ribble. I was just afraid that the leather behind Sonia falls. Okay. So besides digital security, you would have to take care of the physical security. But it looks like it's solid. You don't have to worry with it, Billy. She's safe and sound. But the question that I would like to ask you, Mike, is okay. One piece of advice regarding digital citizenship for parents, and another for teachers, and that will give me a minute or two to introduce the next live streams, and I'll come back to you. So tomorrow we'll be back into Portuguese. and the session will be 1 hour earlier than today, because the fact that Portugal changed to the winter time changed, and we have a guest from Brazil, and they don't change to winter time, so we had a mixed up in our timing. So tomorrow we start at 8:30, not the usual 9:30. And we're going to talk about what's new about cyberbullying in Brazil. And we'll have Alessandra Borelli Vieira. She's a lawyer and also runs Ethics, which is ethics and education project. So, which also involves cyberbullying prevention, and she's very into inside the law that Brazil has produced on to prevent and to tackle bullying and cyberbullying. So that's tomorrow, October 30. And then on the 31st, we invited the Portuguese Ministry of Education, but he couldn't find time on his agenda to be with us. So we'll be the three of us. Besides me and Sonia, Louise will also be with us. And we'll be basically discussing these 15 sessions that we had during the month of October with 18 guests, because in 2 of them, I believe, we had one guest. So this and that session will be at 9:30 in the evening Portuguese time. So these are the sessions that we have planned to end this month, which is bullying prevention month, and it's also a cybersecurity month. So we decided to put the two together and organize a series of sessions on topics related to cyberbullying. And that's how, Mike, you came in. And I have to say thank you very, very much. It was
Thank you.
great to have you. It was a pleasure to have you, and thank you for taking time to be with us, basically.
Sure.
So to finalize, what would be advice for parents and an piece of advice for teachers regarding digital citizenship?
Well, the advice for really for both of them is be involved. Be involved in your students and your children's lives. Know what they're doing, and that you hear a lot about the cyberbullying. Where the kids go off to their rooms and they isolate themselves. You need to have that conversation, and that we're together. We're a family. We have these, and we set rules of when we use technology, and the same thing in the classroom. I started to talk about with teachers. The technology is part of your classroom. It should be part of your rules as well. When you set those and when you have those discussions with students, how does that look like? What is your classroom? What are your expectations? And then finally, balance. It's all about balance. It's the tools are there for us to use, but they shouldn't use us. And so we need to find when they're appropriate, but be together and be involved with each other. Go out, enjoy going to recess and PE and all of those things. But when we need the tools, how are we going to use them? How are we going to use them responsibly?
Well, that's a great piece of advice, and it's a common thread: involvement, parent involvement, teacher involvement. We can't allow technology to divide us. We need to use technology to bring us together. It's a great message. Edith is also commenting, saying, "Thank you for a very useful session. Looking forward to reading Mike's books and learning more about this area, which I am so very passionate about. Thanks, Tito and Sonia, always such great hosts." Thank you for having you. It's a pleasure, Edith. Come
Thank
back
you.
more often. Let me also tell those who follow us in English, the English sessions and not in Portuguese, we'll continue these sessions not as regularly, but we'll be addressing, we'll be having live stream a week every Thursday on topics related to cyberbullying, and on Tuesdays on topics related to internet safety. So, Mike, once again, thank you very, very much. It was a pleasure to have you and learn along with you. I'm eager to put my hands on your book that finally customs was released from customs. And wish you all the best, and let's keep in touch, because I'll be following your work as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tito. Thank you, Sonia. I appreciate it.
It's really nice. To all those that have been following us, we'll keep doing these sessions on Thursdays, as I said, on topics related to cyberbullying, and on Tuesdays on topics related to internet safety. Okay, Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
To all that follow us, and see you next time. Bye.
See you.